Partitioning is another thing we need to look at. Very simply, I'm going to show you an example from another book or a database that I set up years ago that I use for testing all sorts of things. It's a general ledger accounting database, and here's a table here. It says go and create general ledger table, and it has various data types on it, various columns. They're not really that important. What I've done is I partitioned by date, and here are my separate partitions. They happen to be separate table spaces. They don't have to be. What happens when I read this data is if I use the date exactly in the way that the partition is set up, by using a search against the partition key, I can get a very accurate search that will read just this partition. If I've got a multi-terabyte database and reading a single partition reads 25% of the data, I get a much faster response. This is a single layer of partitioning, and this is a range partitioning. You've also got list partitions. This is a range of dates. List where you have a list of values, and you've got things called hash partitions where Oracle divides up the data automatically for you. I've also got in here an example of a multiple layered partition setup where you've got partition by range and then a sub-partition by something else. So within each range date partition you have another sub-partition divided up by lists of chart of account numbers, and this is the syntax for it. We don't need to go into the detail of this. It's way too complicated for this course, but I'm just showing you basically how it works, that it exists, and the very basics of what partitioning is actually for. So we don't need to go further with that now. Another thing is an external table. The default is a heap. When you create an external table, you give it all sorts of configuration stuff which is too advanced for here, but what it's actually doing is it's using the drivers used by a product called SQL Loader, which is a very fast loader for loading data into an Oracle database. An external table is literally one or more text files that are accessed when you read this table. So in the Oracle database, you're actually just creating a structure. You're telling it all the driver information and what to do when it finds data, when it finds errors, and so on and so forth, and how to enclose strings and different types of files where you want to throw out bad data, what you've found, what you haven't found, and log. Multiple files, read something like comma delimited text files directly from disk into an Oracle table definition that can be accessed within an Oracle database. So you're actually not reading the internal Oracle database data tables, you're reading an external data file. And obviously you can have other table attributes, no parallel. Reject limit unlimited is again to do with external tables. All that's telling you is that you can have as many errors as you want, it will still read the data. You have a certain number of errors and you say, oh well, I only want 2 errors, it'll boot it out and you won't get a response if you get more than 2. Compression and non-compression of data. Compression makes the table data smaller, much like a zip function zips a table. The only problem with using compression is that when you read the data, it's got to decompress it first, so it slows it down a bit.